The moment a stranger slid a thin envelope onto my cafe table and whispered, "You will need this tonight," I knew my quiet life was about to end. The cafe sat at the edge of town, where the highway thinned into 2 lanes and pine trees pressed close on both sides. I had been coming there every Thursday afternoon since my husband died, because it smelled like baked apples and old wood, and because the owner never asked how I was doing. That day I was there with my son Lucas and his wife Marissa, sitting across from me in a booth, polished smooth by decades of elbows and conversations. Outside the window, the Oregon sky hung low and gray, the way it always did in late fall. Inside, Marissa stirred her tea without drinking it, the spoon clicking against the cup in a rhythm that made my shoulders tighten. "You really should think about downsizing, Eleanor," she said finally, her voice light but rehearsed. "That land is too much responsibility for one person now." Lucas nodded quickly. He had my husband's eyes, but none of his steadiness. "We just worry about you, Mom. The taxes, the maintenance. Winter is coming again." I smiled, the polite smile I had learned over the last year. "I have lived on that land for 41 years, I said. "I know how to take care of it." Marissa exchanged a look with Lucas. I caught it, because mothers always do. The look that said, "Not yet, but soon." They stood to pay the bill together, leaning close, whispering the way they had started doing more often lately. I stayed seated, gathering my purse and folding my napkin, when I felt a presence beside me. She appeared so suddenly, I startled hard enough to knock my water glass sideways. The woman was in her early 50s, maybe older, with iron-gray hair pulled tight at the nape of her neck. Her coat was dark and heavy, far too warm for indoors, and her eyes did not wander or blink. They locked onto mine, as if she had been looking for me all her life. "Eleanor Hayes," she said, not a question. "Yes," I replied, my heart already racing. She placed a thin manila envelope on the table between us. Her fingers shook slightly as she let go. "You will need this tonight," she whispered. "Whatever you do, do not open it here." I opened my mouth to ask who she was, how she knew my name, what she meant, but she was already turning away. By the time I stood, she had reached the door and slipped outside, swallowed by the passing traffic and mist. I stood there frozen, staring at the envelope as if it might explode. Lucas and Marissa returned moments later. "Everything okay, Mom?" Lucas asked. "Fine," I said too quickly. I slid the envelope into my bag before either of them could see it. My hands would not stop shaking. The drive back to my house passed in a blur of road curves and small talk about weather and real estate prices. They dropped me off at the end of my gravel drive, declining my invitation to come in. I watched their car disappear, then stood there listening to the wind in the trees, feeling suddenly watched. My house waited at the end of the drive, old white siding, green trim, the same home my husband and I had painted together years ago. The land stretched behind it, acres of forest and cleared field, passed down through my husband's family long before I married into it. Inside, I locked the door, something I had not done regularly before my husband died. The envelope lay heavy in my bag, like it knew it did not belong there. I placed it on the kitchen table and sat across from it for a long time without touching it. The house creaked softly, settling around me. Outside, dusk slid into night. I did not know yet that the envelope would lead me to a truth buried deeper than the roots of my land. I only knew that for the first time since my husband died, I was afraid of the people closest to me. I waited until the house was completely dark before I touched the envelope. I do not know why I waited. Maybe part of me hoped that if I ignored it long enough, it would lose its power. Maybe I was afraid that once I opened it, there would be no turning back. I made myself a cup of tea I did not drink and sat at the kitchen table listening to the clock tick and the wind press against the windows. At exactly 8:47, I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a small brass key wrapped in tissue paper and a narrow strip of lined notebook paper folded once. The handwriting was neat and deliberate. 11:32 p.m. Answer: do not call back. That was all. No name, no explanation. My throat felt dry as sand. I checked my phone. 8:51. Almost 3 hours to wait. I locked every door and window, though nothing in my life had ever required that level of caution before. The land around my house was quiet, as it always was at night. Too quiet. No headlights, no voices, just the sound of trees moving in the dark. At 9:30, I tried to distract myself by folding laundry. At 10, I gave up and sat back at the table staring at the key. It was old, heavier than modern keys, with a worn head smoothed by years of use. I turned it over in my palm, trying to imagine what it might open. At 11, I turned off every light except the one above the sink. The yellow glow made the corners of the kitchen feel deeper and farther away. My phone lay on the table, face up, screen dark. 11:31. My heart began to pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. At 11:32, the phone rang. The sound cut through the house, sharp and sudden. I flinched hard enough that my chair scraped the floor. The screen showed no name, no number. I answered on the second ring. "Hello," I said, and my voice did not sound like my own. At first there was only breathing, slow, controlled, close to the microphone. Then a voice came through, low, distorted, as if filtered through something electronic, but unmistakably familiar. "Eleanor," the voice said. My knees went weak. I had heard that voice for over 40 years, in kitchens and fields and bedrooms and hospitals. I had heard it whisper apologies and laughter and promises. It was my husband. "No," my mind screamed. "Impossible! Do not trust Lucas," the voice continued. "Do not trust Marissa. And do not trust the local police." I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. "You are not safe where you are. The land is the reason. They want it empty." "Who is this?" I whispered. My voice shook. "This is not funny." A pause, a breath. "I wish I could tell you everything," the voice said. "I wish I could explain, but if I do not keep it short, they will find me." My heart slammed against my ribs. My husband did not die the way they told you. What happened was not an accident, and if you let them push you out, they will erase what I left behind, erase what I whispered. At that moment, the line crackled violently. The voice cut out, then returned for one final sentence. "The truth is under your feet, Eleanor, and you have very little time." The call ended. I sat frozen, with the phone pressed to my ear long after the screen went dark. The house felt different now, charged and exposed, as if every wall had thinned. I checked the call log. Nothing. No record of the call, as if it had never happened. But my hands were shaking. My chest ached. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, watching the first light creep across the floor, knowing one thing with terrifying clarity. Whatever had killed my husband was still alive, and it was closer to me than I had ever imagined. Lucas came back the next morning. He did not call first. He never used to do that. When my husband was alive, Lucas always called ahead, out of habit or respect, or maybe fear of interrupting something important. Now he pulled into the driveway just after 8, as if the place already belonged to him. I was standing at the sink when I saw his car through the window. My first instinct was to hide the envelope and the key, but I stopped myself. If I acted afraid, he would sense it. Lucas had always been good at sensing weakness. He walked in carrying 2 coffees and a tight smile. "Morning, Mom," he said, placing 1 cup in front of me. "You look tired." "I did not sleep well," I said evenly. He sat down across from me, glancing around the kitchen like someone doing a quiet inspection. His eyes lingered on the door to my husband's old office a second too long. "We need to talk," he said. I waited. "Marissa and I have been discussing your situation," he continued. "The property, your finances, your health." I wrapped my hands around the coffee, but did not drink it. "My situation?" "Yes," he said gently. "You have been alone a long time now. This land is a burden. You do not need to prove anything anymore." There it was again, the same words, the same rehearsed concern. "I am not a burden to myself, Lucas," I said. He exhaled through his nose. "Mom, this is not about pride. It is about reality. The taxes alone are climbing. Insurance, repairs. If something happens out here, no one would even know for hours." Something like what I asked. He hesitated just long enough for the silence to feel heavy. "An accident," he said finally. "A fall. A medical episode." The word accident made my stomach tighten. Marissa arrived an hour later unannounced. She did not sit down. She remained standing near the doorway, scrolling through her phone like she was already late for something. "I took the liberty of reviewing your accounts," she said, looking up at last, "just to understand where things stand." "You had no right," I said. She smiled politely. "As Lucas' next of kin, he has an obligation to know." I looked at my son. He did not meet my eyes. "According to what we found," Marissa continued, "you cannot sustain this lifestyle much longer. You are dipping into savings at an alarming rate." "I am fine," I said. "Are you?" she asked softly. "Because, to me, it looks like grief is clouding your judgment." Lucas leaned forward. "Mom, maybe we should talk about guardianship. Just temporarily, until things stabilize." The room went very still. "Guardianship," I repeated. "It is just a legal safeguard," Marissa said quickly, "to protect you, to make sure decisions are made in your best interest." My heart began to pound. The voice from the night before echoed in my mind. "Do not trust them." "You want control," I said quietly, "not protection." Marissa sighed, as if disappointed. "Eleanor, please, this does not have to be difficult. If you agree to sell the property and move closer to town, all of this goes away." And if I do not? Lucas looked away. Marissa answered, Then we will have to move forward without your consent. A chill ran through me. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Farms are dangerous places, Eleanor. People your age get hurt all the time. It would be tragic if something happened before this was resolved. I stood up so fast, my chair tipped backward. Get out, I said. Lucas looked shocked. Mom, calm down. Get out of my house now. They left together, Marissa already dialing her phone, Lucas glancing back once with an expression I did not recognize. Not concern, calculation. I locked the door after them, my hands shaking. For the first time since my husband died, I understood something clearly. They were not worried about me. They were afraid of what I was standing on. And whatever was buried beneath my land had turned my own family into strangers, capable of destroying me to get it. After Lucas and Marissa left, I did not cry. I cleaned. I washed the coffee cups they had touched. I wiped the table. I swept the floor as if order could protect me from what was unraveling. When there was nothing left to clean, I stood in the middle of the kitchen and realized the truth had settled into my bones. My husband had not been wrong. I went to his office and closed the door behind me. The room still smelled faintly of cedar and machine oil. His desk sat exactly where he had left it the last time he walked out of this house. I had avoided this room for months because grief lived here. Now I understood that something else did too. I opened the filing cabinet. At first, everything looked ordinary. Property tax statements, old insurance policies, equipment manuals. I forced myself to slow down, to look closer, the way my husband always did. That was when I noticed the dates. Several documents had been moved recently before his death. Not removed, just repositioned. A man preparing not to be discovered, but to be understood. I found a thin folder tucked behind the deed paperwork. Inside were bank statements I had never seen before. Cash withdrawals spaced carefully across months, always under the threshold that would raise questions, always ending 2 weeks before his death. My chest tightened. My husband hated cash. He believed in records and receipts and proof. If he was withdrawing money like this, it was because he did not want a trail. I sat down and closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember. The last year of his life he had changed. Not in ways I could explain at the time. He woke at night, took long walks alone, started locking the barn when he never had before. Once I had asked him what was wrong, and he smiled and said, "I worry too much." I kept digging. At the bottom of the drawer, I found a folded sheet of yellow paper. My name written across the top in his handwriting. Eleanor. If you are reading this, I could not stop it the way I hoped. Do not ask questions where ears listen. The truth is buried, and silence was the only thing that kept you alive. My hands trembled so badly, I had to set the paper down. Buried. The word from the phone call echoed in my head. I searched his computer next. It took longer than I expected. He had always been careful with passwords. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. I tried the dog's name. Nothing. Then I tried the address of the property, the first one he ever owned before we married. The screen unlocked. My stomach dropped. There were emails he had archived instead of deleting. Correspondence with a criminal defense attorney in another state. Short, guarded messages, no details, just confirmations of meetings and payments. Why would my husband need a criminal lawyer? I scrolled further. Photographs. Night shots of the edge of our land. Tire tracks I did not recognize. A section of the forest near the old slope that he had always told me not to walk alone. I remembered now. The arguments. Him insisting I stay away from that part of the property, telling me it was unsafe without explaining why. He had been protecting me, and whatever he had discovered had been important enough to frighten him into secrecy. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. Lucas had grown up here. He knew every path, every hollow, every place someone could hide something and never be seen. The thought made my stomach turn. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from an unknown number. You are doing the right thing. Do not confront them. They are already watching. I stared at the screen until it went dark. My husband had left me a trail, not to accuse, but to survive. And for the first time, I understood that the man I loved had walked into danger alone, so that I would not have to. Now that danger was mine, and the land beneath my feet was no longer just home. It was evidence. I did not go outside for the rest of that day. I watched the land through the windows instead. The tree line, the slope behind the north field, the stretch of ground my husband had always told me to avoid after dusk. For years I had thought it was concern for my safety. Now I knew it was something else entirely. By late afternoon, a truck I did not recognize rolled slowly past the end of my driveway. It did not turn in. It did not stop. It simply passed and disappeared down the road. But it came back an hour later. That was when I understood the message. They are already watching. Just after sunset, my phone rang again. This time, it was not distorted. If you are alone, do not hang up, the man said quietly. Who are you? I asked. Someone your husband trusted when he ran out of options. My name is Grant Mercer. I cannot stay long. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room. He told me if anything happened to him, I should watch you until you were ready to see the truth. He also told me your son would not wait forever. I closed my eyes. Tell me. There is a service tunnel under your property, Grant said, older than the house. It was built decades ago and later expanded. It connects to natural rock chambers that were never mapped. Most people would never find it. My heart hammered. Lucas found it years ago. He realized it could hide things no one would look for, things that could move quietly and disappear just as fast. What things? I whispered. Illegal shipments, storage, transfers. The land made it perfect. Isolated, private, protected by family loyalty. I slid down into a chair. Your husband discovered signs of activity about 2 years ago. Vehicles where they should not be, fresh tracks after rain, equipment being moved at night. He followed the trail until it led underground. I remembered the nights he came in late, covered in dirt, claiming he had been fixing a drainage issue. I remembered the fear in his eyes when headlights appeared near the trees. He documented everything, Grant continued. Photos, times, names. He tried to stop it quietly. He confronted Lucas. My breath caught. Lucas promised to end it, to walk away. But once you are inside something like that, there is no walking away. My hands curled into fists. Your husband refused to be silent. That is when they decided he was a problem. The words landed like stones. He did not drown, Grant said. His car was forced off the road. I was following at a distance. I could not get there in time. I felt something inside me crack. Not loudly, quietly, the way stone breaks under pressure. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. "Because they are moving faster. They want the land sold. Once it changes hands, the tunnels disappear under permits and construction. Evidence buried forever." I thought of Lucas in my kitchen talking about accidents, Marissa mentioning guardianship. The timing was no coincidence. "What do they want from me?" I asked. "They want you gone, either compliant or removed. Your husband bought time by dying. You bought more time by not selling yet, but they are running out of patience." The call ended abruptly. I sat there long after the line went dead. The house felt smaller now, the walls thinner, the floor beneath my feet no longer solid. I walked to the back window and stared at the land stretching into darkness. 41 years I had walked that property, believing it held memories and roots and safety. Now I knew it held something else, something poisonous. And the most terrifying truth of all settled into my chest. The danger was not hidden in the ground. It was the fact that my own son had chosen it over his family. And he would not stop unless someone forced him to. The knock came just after midnight. Not loud, not urgent. 3 slow, deliberate taps that carried through the house like a warning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with all the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the wind moving through the trees when I heard it. I did not answer. The knock came again, followed by a familiar voice. "Mom, it is Lucas. We need to talk." My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it through the door. I stayed still, counting my breaths, the way my husband once taught me during a storm. Then another voice joined his, calm, professional, almost rehearsed. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Deputy Collins. We are here to check on you. The police." "Do not trust them," the voice had warned me. I stood slowly and moved to the window beside the door, careful not to cast a shadow. 2 cars sat in my driveway, Lucas's and a patrol vehicle. Marissa stood near the porch rail, arms folded, her posture rigid and impatient. I opened the door just enough to speak. "What is this about?" I asked. Lucas stepped forward immediately. "Mom, we are worried. You have not been answering calls. Marissa says you have been acting confused, talking about things that do not make sense." Marissa did not deny it. She met my eyes and smiled faintly. Deputy Collins cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hayes, we received a report that you may be experiencing distress. We would like to come in and make sure you are safe." I knew then exactly what they were doing. This was not concern. This was removal. "I am fine," I said. "You can leave." Marissa's voice sharpened. "Eleanor, please do not make this harder. You are alone out here. You have been through trauma. Sometimes people do not realize when they need help." Lucas reached for the door. I slammed it shut and locked it. The shouting began immediately. Lucas pounding, Marissa yelling that I was being irrational, the deputy threatening to force entry if I did not cooperate. My hands shook, but my mind was suddenly clear. I ran. I grabbed my coat and the flashlight my husband kept by the back door, and slipped out through the mudroom, stepping into the freezing night. The air burned my lungs as I crossed the yard, keeping low, moving fast toward the trees. Behind me, the front door burst open. "Mom, stop!" Lucas shouted. Flashlights cut through the dark, slicing the woods into fragments of light and shadow. I ran harder than I thought my body still could, branches whipping my face, roots catching my feet. I knew this land. I had walked it for decades. They knew it too, but fear made them careless. I reached the clearing near the old slope and dropped to my knees beside the place my husband had once joked was good for hiding treasure. The ground was cold and hard. I dug with my hands, nails breaking, skin tearing, until my fingers struck something solid. A container. Plastic, sealed, heavy. Footsteps crashed through the brush behind me. I tore the container free and ran. A beam of light caught me, and for a moment I saw Lucas's face, twisted with panic and rage. "Give it to me, Mom," he screamed. "You do not understand what you are doing." I understood everything. I ran deeper into the woods, lungs screaming, heart hammering, until I saw headlights on the old service road beyond the tree line. A car idled, engine running. The passenger door opened. "Get in!" a woman called. I did not hesitate. The car surged forward as I slammed the door, clutching the container to my chest. In the rear window, I saw Lucas stumble to a stop, flashlight falling from his hand. The woman driving did not look at me. "They crossed a line tonight," she said quietly. "There is no going back now." I stared at the dark trees rushing past, knowing with absolute certainty that whatever was inside the container was powerful enough to destroy my family, and powerful enough to save my life. The night swallowed the farm behind us, and with it, the last illusion that this could ever be resolved peacefully. We did not stop driving until the road narrowed and the trees gave way to empty fields. The woman finally spoke again once we were far enough away that my hands stopped shaking. "My name is Claire Donovan," she said. "I worked with your husband the last year of his life. Not officially, off the record." I held the container tighter. "What is inside this?" "Everything they cannot afford to lose." She pulled into the lot of a closed roadside motel and cut the engine. The silence rang in my ears. "Open it," she said. "You deserve to know." My fingers trembled as I twisted the seal. Inside were flash drives sealed in plastic, a small notebook wrapped in oilcloth, and a folded letter with my name written in my husband's careful handwriting. I opened the letter first. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are holding this, then I failed to stop them. I am so sorry. I left you with this burden, but you were always stronger than you believed." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Claire gave me a moment, then spoke quietly. "He documented everything. The tunnel access, the transfers, the payments, and proof that Lucas and Marissa coordinated it all." I felt sick. "He tried to protect you," she continued. "He knew, once you knew, you would never back down." I wiped my face. "What happens now?" "Now we set the trap." The plan formed quickly because there was no time for hesitation. Lucas and Marissa would come for the container. They had crossed too many lines to stop now. They would want control back. Silence restored. We would give them the chance. By morning, a message was sent from my phone. I will return what I took. Meet at the house tonight. Come alone. I knew they would not come alone, but they would come. That evening I stood in my kitchen again, the same place where everything had begun. The house was dark except for one overhead light. The containers sat on the table, visible and tempting. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady when the knock came. Lucas entering first. His face was pale, eyes darting. Marissa followed close behind, her expression unreadable. And behind them, the deputy stepped in quietly, shoving the door. "You have no idea what you have done," Marissa said coldly. I looked at my son. "You killed your father." Lucas shook his head violently. "I did not mean to. It was supposed to scare him, just enough to make him stop." Marissa's eyes flashed. "He was a liability." That was all Claire needed. The lights snapped on, voices shouted, doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the room, weapons drawn. Everyone on the ground, hands where we can see them. The deputy froze. Marissa screamed. Lucas collapsed to his knees. I stood perfectly still as they were restrained cuffs, clicking wrists forced behind backs. Lucas looked up at me, tears streaking his face. "Mom, please." I felt something inside me harden, not into hatred, but into clarity. "You chose this," I said quietly, "not me, not your father." As they led him away, he did not fight. He only looked back once, like a child who had finally realized there would be consequences. When the house was empty again, I sat down heavily. Claire stood beside me. "He left you one last protection." She handed me a document pulled from the container. A trust established in my name months before his death. Funds set aside, legal safeguards triggered if the land was threatened. "He thought of everything," I whispered. "He trusted you to finish it," she said. Outside, sirens faded into the distance. The nightmare was not over yet, but the truth was no longer buried. And for the first time since my husband died, I felt something like justice beginning to breathe. The house felt hollow after they were gone, not quiet in the peaceful way, but emptied, like something vital had been torn out of it. I sat alone at the kitchen table long after the agents left, staring at the place where my son had stood in handcuffs, unable to reconcile the memory of the boy I raised with the man who had chosen profit over blood. Dawn arrived slowly, pale light spilling across the floorboards. I realized I had survived the night. That felt like an achievement I did not know how to name. The weeks that followed moved with a strange intensity. Statements, lawyers, investigators walking my land with maps and equipment. The tunnels were sealed and documented. What had poisoned the ground beneath my home was finally exposed to the air. Lucas was charged. Marissa received a longer list of charges than either of them expected. The deputy resigned before the indictment reached his desk. I did not attend the first hearing. I was not ready to see my son behind glass. Instead, I walked the land. I walked the fields at sunrise. I stood at the edge of the forest, listening to birds return to places that had once felt watched. I dug my hands into the soil of the garden and let the earth remind me that not everything buried is meant to stay hidden. One afternoon, a letter arrived from my husband's attorney. Inside was confirmation of the trust my husband had established quietly months before his death. enough to maintain the property, enough to protect me from being forced out, enough to choose my future without fear. He had known. He had prepared for this outcome even when it meant accepting his own. I cried then, not from pain, but from gratitude. In time, the farm changed. I leased part of the land to a young couple committed to sustainable work. I closed off the areas that carried too much memory. I learned which paths I could walk again and which I needed to leave behind. I visited Lucas once, months later. He could not look at me at first. When he finally did, there was no anger left, only regret. I did not forgive him that day, but I told him the truth. "Your father loved you until the end," I said, "and because of that love, he trusted me with what you could not be trusted with. Responsibility. That was all I could give." When I left the prison, I did not look back. Life did not return to what it was. It became something else, stronger, quieter, mine. At 67, I learned that strength does not announce itself. It reveals itself when there is nothing left to rely on except your own judgment and your willingness to stand alone. The land is still here. So am I. And the truth that nearly destroyed us all now rests where it belongs, not buried, but known. The most dangerous betrayal is not the one that comes from strangers, but the one that grows quietly inside family. Silence may feel like protection, but truth is what keeps us alive. And no matter your age, strength does not fade. Sometimes it only waits for the moment it is needed most.